Good afternoon. The title of my message today is Back the Blue with a question mark. I see a lot of people come across my social media feeds with the Back the Blue icon, the American flag with a blue stripe through it. In this video, I'm going to make the case that American law enforcement has become lawless. Now, we want to hold our law enforcement in high regard, but law enforcement is made up of sinful men and women, just like any other group of people. For example, welders, clergy, politicians, plumbers, auto mechanics, and bankers, just to name a few. The scriptures tell us in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." And in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9, it declares that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. This is just two of many verses that declare the sinfulness of man. Now, I want everyone to keep in mind that police officers are required to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. What is the purpose of government? In Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 4, it declares that the purpose of government is to punish evildoers and reward those who do good. The Declaration of Independence tells us that the purpose of government is to preserve the people's rights. Here are some examples of lawlessness by law enforcement: restraining orders, red flag laws, civil asset forfeiture, and child protective services. In many states, your wife or girlfriend can just say that she's afraid of you. You will be removed from your home, you will not be able to have contact with your kids, and your guns will be confiscated. In the case of red flag laws, someone can report you to the police saying that you may be a danger to yourself or someone else, and based upon this, the police can go to a judge and get an extreme risk protection order, and the police will show up at your house and confiscate your guns. In the case of civil asset forfeiture, if you get stopped by the police and found with a large sum of money, and I have heard of this being as little as $500, the police can assume that it is the proceeds of criminal activities and confiscate it. In some states, the police have the ability to scan your bank cards and clean out your bank accounts. Lastly, you can be accused by someone to Child Protective Services, or in the case of here in Massachusetts, the Department of Children and Families, of some type of abuse or neglect, and Child Protective Services, with the help of law enforcement, will come and kidnap your children. Just recently in Idaho, Child Protective Services kidnapped little baby Cyrus from his mother just because she missed a doctor's appointment. The commonality of all of these things that I just listed is, number one, there wasn't necessarily a crime committed. Number two, the defendant was not allowed due process and was not allowed to confront his or her accuser. You could argue that due process would happen after the fact. The problem with this is that it shifts the burden of proof away from the accuser and to the accused. These cases can be established by the testimony of only one witness. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15 declares, "One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established." For those of you who say that we have separation of church and state, and therefore Scripture is irrelevant, to you I say this: all men and all governments of men are subject to God's law at all times. That being said, most men and all governments of men are in rebellion against God, and they will answer for that. In the case of civil asset forfeiture, you will spend many times more money trying to get back what was taken in attorney's fees and lost wages than what was taken. And that is by design. All of these things that I have listed are a violation of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments of the Constitution, among others. If a police officer enforces a gun law, a knife law, or a law against martial arts weapons, he or she is violating his or her oath of office. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution declares a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of self-protection is a basic human right given to man by God, and therefore is not subject to regulation by the governments of men. This is why we need to read the scriptures and the Constitution for ourselves. Many judges and politicians pervert the interpretation of the Constitution, just like many pastors pervert the interpretation of scriptures. Both have evil intentions who do so. Throughout the COVID pandemic, wicked governors were able to foment their evil upon their constituents because law enforcement officers enforced their lawless edicts, such as arresting business owners for opening their businesses, arresting pastors for holding church services, arresting people for not wearing masks. I remember seeing a video of a police officer tasing a woman for not wearing a mask at a kids' outdoor sporting event, and arresting people for being outside of their homes. During the summer of 2020, there was rioting in cities across America. Police stood down and allowed lawless mobs to loot, burn, pillage, vandalize, assault, and murder. People's homes and businesses were destroyed, women were raped, people were beaten senselessly, and a few people were even murdered. For the most part, the only ones who were arrested were people trying to defend themselves, their families, their neighbors, their homes, or their businesses. For example, Kyle Rittenhouse and the McCluskeys. I remember seeing a news clip of a bunch of police officers marching in formation in one of the cities where the riots were taking place, marching through a residential neighborhood like a bunch of goose-stepping goons, not in the downtown area where the rioting was taking place. The people were on their porches watching the police march by. The officer leading the formation started yelling for the people to get back in their houses. Then the police officer says, "Light them up." And these police officers started shooting the people on their porches with pepper balls. Law enforcement assisted the deep state in the stealing of the 2020 election by removing poll watchers from the polling places so that election officials could engage in their evil deeds. In the last year, law enforcement has removed or denied citizens access to public meetings such as school board meetings and city council meetings that the citizens have every right to attend and speak out at, so that these officials can invent evil policies without public scrutiny, a violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. In places like New York City and Boston, law enforcement are enforcing vaccine passports. Police officers arrest people for blocking the doors of abortion clinics or violating noise ordinances outside of abortion clinics while allowing babies to be murdered inside. And yes, I know that these police officers were ordered to do these things. Do you know who else blindly obeyed unlawful orders? The guards at Nazi concentration camps. If you are a police officer who may not be committing these lawless acts, but you stand by silently while your brother officers are doing so, you are just as guilty as they are. When law enforcement officers obey unlawful orders, they are no longer law enforcement officers, but rather thug enforcers for a criminal entity, just like mafia soldiers. When the higher ranking authority gives unlawful orders, it is the duty of the lower ranking authorities to interpose on behalf of the people. This is the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. This is further described in the book, The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates by Pastor Matthew J. Trewhella. I would encourage everyone to read this book, especially police officers and government officials. The citizen has a role in the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. If a police officer interposes on behalf of the people, then the people must rally behind him or her. If the police officer faces disciplinary action like suspension or firing, the police officer, the people must protest to their superiors, go down to the mayor's office or city council and demand their reinstatement. If they are suspended or fired, bring them groceries. Start a give, send, go to help them with their mortgage or their bills or their legal fees. Take money out of your own pocket to help. To restore this nation, it is going to take more commitment than posting stupid memes on Facebook and then returning to watching your football game. We must put our money where our mouths are. It is going to take sacrificial love. 1 John chapter 3 verse 18 tells us, "Little children, let us not love in word or tongue, but in deed and truth." The reason that the doctrine of the lesser magistrates is not used more often or is not effective is that people are immoral, but also it is because of the apathy of the people. If the magistrate sticks his neck out and the people do not rally behind him, he gets his head cut off. I would also encourage everyone to get a pocket constitution. You can get one at Barnes & Noble for $2 and read it. Also, if there are any law enforcement officers in Berkshire County, Massachusetts watching this, reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. We can meet. I will buy you a coffee, give you a copy of the Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, a pocket constitution, and a Bible. Thank you for listening, and may God have mercy on America.